gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching GEEKCASTER, everything sci-fi, fantasy, geek culture, all the things you geek over. I'm Michael Seven. Michael, you could call me Seven, and today we have in the studio
Kristine, back in action.
Kristine, back in action. So this is part two, of our conversation on Star Wars. We had a very interesting conversation on Star Wars. And what makes it so interesting, we are Star Wars fans, but we're talking about all the things that went wrong in the Star Wars universe, whether that be the promotion, something in the script, something on the shows. So Kristine, first of all, what'd you think of the last show, and what was the takeaway?
The last show, I enjoyed the last show. It was very fun. I think I liked the juxtaposition between not only just different opinions, but like older Star Wars fans versus like a newer Star Wars fan like myself, versus people who had only watched the movies versus people who had viewed more of like the TV and like wider content.
Right.
And it was a very, very interesting marriage of discussion.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it was interesting. One of the guests, Jay, I don't know, he might make an appearance. Hopefully we can get him to come back. But one thing that he said that what I thought was super interesting, I already know how it ends. So why do I care?
That is fair.
And I think when they first said they're going to do Phantom Menace, I felt a little bit of that energy even back then.
Mm-hmm.
Was why? Let's keep going. I want more Luke. I want to know what happened. I want to know. And during that time, there were already books out about Luke and Leia both having children, and those children having the Force. And if you keep with the energy of A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi, there were no more Jedi. Darth Vader, the Empire went across the whole universe, and there's no Jedi left. So and it created an intensity that Luke winning was, if he was to die, the whole culture would die. It had an impact. I think where it is now, where anybody can be a Jedi, and guess what? No, there are a bunch of little Jedi running around. They're just in hiding. It's the urgency isn't there anymore.
I can understand that, and I can sympathize with that. Like something I heard recently was similar, that like, well, I already know the destination, so like, why do I care? Like, we already reached the Emerald City. Like, I don't want to go skipping down the yellow brick road for no reason.
Right.
I guess what I enjoy is that going back to episode 1, and then progressing through the movies, and then going back to the shows, and that fills out, and that like jumps around in the timeline. Like I love looking at the Star Wars timeline and where everything falls in the timeline, because releases aren't chronological at all. It'll jump from like after The Empire Strikes Back to before Revenge of the Sith, to like somewhere in between. And you do have to always go to those references to find out like, where are we in time? So you understand, like, okay, why is there button here? So you like understand, like, okay, where is Luke right now? Where is Vader? Like, is he still around, or are we like post that? And I don't know, I kind of find that fun to then like piece together all those stories, because then they're very good at. I think they've gotten very good. I think they've gotten very good at character development, and then you care about what happens to those characters. Like, even with the whole Ahsoka thing, like, you watch to the end of Clone Wars, and this is a spoiler, those who've never seen Clone Wars, but you watch her go through Order 66. like that's like the end of the show is her battling for her life through that, and you find out, I don't know, I guess more the characters' journeys. Like you go through, like, yeah, you see like Luke growing up, but you get to see in the Obi-Wan show, what was Obi-Wan up to in that desert all those years? Like, what was he doing? And it just, I
And
don't
you
know,
know what?
brings them more
Actually,
humanity, I guess.
what you
Like,
brought it, that's very interesting, because if you have, I think if you're already a Star Wars fan and you have a favorite character, I think it's easier to be invested and say, I want to know how this person got to that. I think that totally makes sense. And I think that's totally fair.
right?
I feel that people walking into it, why should I bother? Like, and I tried
Oh
to
yeah,
look
no,
at.
I.
Hmm.
Oh, sorry, continue.
Well, no, I would say when I saw Ahsoka, I get it and I'm riding with it. Cool. But I think if watching that series was their first step into that character or the Star Wars world,
Oh, it doesn't make sense.
I would totally be, why do I care? Why do I care?
Yeah.
And to me, that's bad writing, in a sense that, like, you have to almost treat it like, I think every step should make a difference. Every step should be a sense of urgency, and I didn't feel that in the series so far. What I've seen of that.
What I think is very important, I think with any kind of franchise content,
Mm-hmm.
is like, I think they do it a lot in Marvel where it's like, you can kind of, like, this can kind of stand alone, but it's better if you saw everything before,
The
or else
connection's
it's
better.
gonna be a little funky.
Right.
I feel like the thing about Star Wars is that it's such an interconnecting galaxy
Well,
that
now, right.
you kind of do want that context. Like
Interesting.
everyone on from last week is gonna hate this,
Uh-oh.
but I tell people to watch the movies in episode order because it's one big chronological story. Like when
Right.
a few years ago I tried to watch A New Hope,
Mm-hmm,
but I was
mm-hmm.
like, it's cool, it's okay.
Okay.
But then
Wow.
when I finally did like the big watch, like I watched everything, I started episode 1. And so by the time I got to A New Hope, episode 4, I'm invested. I'm like, oh my
Interesting.
God. Like, and like I watched Anakin grow up and now he's Vader and he had these babies and like these are the babies and like this is
Right,
going
right,
on.
right.
And so even though like the cinematography is older and like as a millennial, I'm like, okay, it's
And
an
if you
older
pay attention
movie.
to the script, there are things that conflict, like the
There
metachlorian
there are
conversation.
there
Oh, do you remember your mother,
well,
which you never saw your mother, and there's all these little things that are like, which
yeah,
they should not have made those mistakes. Like,
they
because.
are. It does get fuzzy.
Mhm.
It gets fuzzy when you get down to those nitty gritties, and I mean, and that's what nerds do. We love
And
to get down
a
into the
Star
nitty
Trek
gritty. Like,
fan would never have any of this. It would have not
oh
been
my God,
acceptable.
my
Star.
boyfriend's a Star Trek fan. Don't even get me started.
So,
Like we're a battling household
oh,
between Star Wars and Star Trek.
yeah.
It's the never ending
I have
saga.
some questions, but I have to leave that for another thing because, real quick, I can't. I got to get it out. Sorry, fans. Got to get it out.
Get it out. Go.
When they decided to, here's a stupid excuse to reboot it and forget everything that ever happened before. That made me mad. And I know as a Star
Yeah.
Trek fan who's like, oh, you did us dirty. But
Well, they got so many years. They also got a lot more screen time than Star Wars ever got before. Like I was talking to my
true.
uncle who gifted me all of his lovely comics, which I like have it in like a beautiful archival box now. It's lovely. He was saying that like the 3 movies came out like over the course of like a decade plus, and then there was nothing for like 20 years, almost 20 years. There was nothing except for the Legends canon.
Well,
like except for Legends, there was the books and the comics.
There were shows that were like there were I think 2 different Ewok series. I know.
Oh yeah, the animated ones, right? I've never seen like big episodes.
There was
I've seen clips of them.
Right.
I've seen clips. I've never gone and like watched them. I also watched the Christmas special.
Oh.
I did watch that. I watched it last
Yeah.
year, and because everyone was like, "He's so bad, but he's so good." Like you have to see it.
But
And
and
yeah, no, it
yeah,
was great with Chewbacca's Christmas. Like
it.
it's
I think that's the thing too, where I mean, we could make that broader to DC. Well, more so Marvel. But just doing too much. It's too
yeah,
much of a money grab with Star Wars to the point where a lot of fans are like nothing is special because of the scarcity of content. You wanted to watch it 50 million times. You wanted, actually it's interesting because you wanted the toys, you wanted the pillowcases, the toothbrush, the because
yeah,
you didn't really see it. But
yeah.
now
It
it's
made it special,
constantly in your face. It's like, well, I get it or I
right?
don't get it.
There's a lot of Grogu stuff out there. Everyone loves them some Baby Yoda.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like too much. But it's interesting. That's interesting.
Um,
So, oh yeah, so what else that was said last show that I thought that really but that was big. I already know how it ends, so why do I care? The other thing
yeah.
that was
Though
huge,
though life is about the journey, not the destination.
allegedly. So I'll tell you when it ends. Like that's yet to be yet
Fair
to
enough.
be.
Fair enough.
Like really? That was it for a slice of pizza? I went through all this for that? Wow. Who knows? Um, trying to think of a recap of a. Oh, so having so many things out of order and the conflicting the conflicting scripts that really bothered me a lot. It really did because I feel that there was no excuse to mess things up because you saw the other ones, so you could kind of write to where things are at, you know. And I think people didn't. I guess it was so focused on toys and let's just put this out. They just didn't focus
Yeah.
on that.
Hmm.
I think the
I
first.
can.
Good.
Oh, sorry. No, no, continue. I should stop interrupting.
No, it's fine. I feel the first saving grace, and we've had this conversation way before the show was what was it, the Rogue One. Rogue
Yeah. No,
Rogue.
Rogue One's excellent.
Yeah.
You know, I was thinking just a few minutes before we got on,
Mm-hmm.
just as far as like you said before, like content being able to stand on its own
Mm-hmm.
versus content that falls within the context of older content. Like
Mm.
Ahsoka, particularly, Dave Filoni said, "This is Rebels season 5." Like that is what's going on. We're picking up with Ahsoka after that, and we're picking up with these characters. But yeah, if you didn't watch Rebels, you don't know what's going on. Who's Ezra Bridger? Who's this blue guy? General Thrawn. I don't give a damn about who this guy is.
Right.
But if you had watched that cartoon, then you would be super invested in these characters, and you would love the continuation of the story.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas something in regards to new content like Andor, I actually think the show Andor can stand by itself,
Yeah.
and it was really beautifully made. Probably one of the
Beautiful.
most like beautifully made Star Wars content that they've ever made. Um, and yeah, you don't really need to know like what Andor goes on to do in Rogue One. Like you're really just learning about this guy named
Mm-hmm.
Cassian and his kind of like haphazard life,
Right.
and you don't really need to know anything else. And you
Right.
just know that there's some sort of like
Mm-hmm.
dictatory situation going on.
And
Which if you know that's the Empire, great.
mm-hmm.
And if you
For sure.
don't, that's okay.
It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
You could, and I think that's good content, and I think that's where I come from with the some of the shows where um what was it? The Mandalorian really they played with us a lot with what's his connection with because a lot of people as a fan they really wanted why is I'm forgetting the name right, the bounty hunter.
Din Djarin.
No.
Oh, Boba Fett.
Everybody really wanted Boba Fett. We wanted a Boba Fett show. We still want a Boba Fett show. And they played around with that a lot in the script. And also, we really want more Yoda, even though Yoda is dead, right? So it's
Yeah,
like,
no, a Yoda show would be dope.
so this is why it's like Baby Yoda, Baby Yoda. So I think they played
Yeah.
with us a lot. There are good aspects of the show. I feel it was stretched out. It's almost like they had really good scripts. Oh no, you know what? I'll say it this way. It's like having a really good your favorite fruit juice,
Hmm.
and you just keep adding water to stretch it out. And that's how I felt about The Mandalorian. Um, and then when we got to Book of Boba Fett, it was like, again, little moments, but the moments were even smaller, where you you didn't really have to do this, or you weren't prepared to really do this. They didn't give us Boba
Yeah.
Fett. They
It
gave us a
really,
change man, right? Good.
yeah. You know, it was, I will say I have a lot of thoughts on The Mandalorian, as always. With Book of Boba Fett, I think they could have done a better job. I can agree with that. I think like it really informed the show really informed more to The Mandalorian. It was
Yes.
almost like
Yeah.
this is developing the
Yeah.
progress of The Mandalorian more than it's developing the progress of Boba Fett.
Yes. Yes. And
Because like
having
they're set at the same time, very much in the same place, like, and I get it because the best episodes of Boba wasn't in. Like, they were about Din Djarin and Grogu, and Ahsoka and Luke, and like,
yes, that
everyone
was
else except Boba.
like, I think what was it? The last episode was like, whoa, this is amazing. This was great. Why wasn't the whole season like this?
Yeah, I heard something that I guess made sense in regards to the progress of where the Mandalorian was moving,
Mhm.
but it's like they needed this content to happen in order for like the next season to progress. And it's like, okay, we either like add this content at the start of the next season, or we can like, or I guess they decided we're going to tack this on to Boba Fett because it makes sense in the timeline. It didn't make sense to Boba Fett.
It really didn't. I mean, I like the concept of a changed man. I think
It's
it's
very
in,
Western.
it's well, that's the funny thing, because it was like, well, you know, the Incredible Hulk had an old series back in the day,
Yeah.
and that was pretty much very much this Western every step of the way. And actually, the A Team it's the same setup, where
Yeah.
there's a mission, and everywhere you go, there's these little stories, little missions till you get there. I mean,
Yeah.
it's I wouldn't say the oldest trick in the book, but I mean, it's
Yeah,
classic.
it's a trope. You have your adventure of the week
Right.
kind of set up, and like there are little things progressing a bigger storyline, but for the most part, it's like adventure of the week. I mean, Doctor Who still operates the same.
Right. But
Like there's a bigger overlying story, but like
Right.
they're individual adventure episodes.
The reason why I didn't like that is because I guess that's TV, very surreal. While when we watch these things, they present it very much like a film, and like this big grand set and this and that. And I feel that in the concept of a film, even though it's like a film series or a series film, um, it doesn't feel right. It feels forced. It feels like you shouldn't do that. In fact, they would have been better to do 3 amazing episodes,
Yeah, have like a mini series.
like and just go somewhere else. Because to stretch this long thing out just to attach this somewhere else, I feel the fans are intelligent enough that we'll just ride with you. But give us amazing moments constantly. Don't keep putting water in the juice. That's kind of how I feel about it.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah. So yeah, so that's it for that. But I'm glad you brought up Endor. I was hesitant to watch it. I was like, no, another. But it was worth it. It was.
It's a slow burn, but like
Yeah.
once you kind of piece it all together, because the first 3 episodes, I was like, okay, And then like the
Yeah.
climax of the heist was like really exciting, but it
Yeah.
definitely was a slow burn. Like, but once you got into it, you're like, oh, this is
Right.
huge.
Yeah.
It's the beginning of the rebellion.
Right.
Like, it's
Right. And the grittiness, I like I like how it was filmed. I like how it was shot. But yeah,
yeah,
that slow
beautiful.
burn turned me off because it's Star Wars. Like Star Wars is a fantasy, little bit a fantasy sci-fi adventure action genre. So when you take out the action and you know what I mean, and
Yeah,
it's just like you took out some of the elements that make Star Wars so amazing. That is like, but I do appreciate having the Star Wars universe not be so much about the lightsaber and so much about
yeah.
guns.
Like
Choo choo choo.
not
Mm-hmm.
always like, oh, here's this force sensitive main character and like everything's centered around them
Right.
and the force and being the Jedi and like the
Mm-hmm.
light side versus the dark side. Um, I also think it's interesting when you do have these large franchises and like you don't want it to get stale. Like you don't just want to keep making
Right.
the same format over and over. Like another like thing in Marvel that you've been seeing less with the movies and more with the shows. That
Mm.
they've been like trying out different formats. Like Loki's a little quirky, and then you had like the very humorous, far removed She-Hulk series, and then you had
Right.
kind of the more like juvenile teenage Miss Marvel, like, and that was a big juxtaposition to like WandaVision. That was a really big trip for everyone. Let's
WandaVision
be honest,
was
WandaVision was brilliant
like, what are you
because
doing?
nobody understood what was going on
That's just my face. I was
until
like, I saw it, but why? It was
right,
interesting.
and then even that I would say was a bit of a slow burn because and especially because Disney had brought back the week to week release
Mm-hmm.
that like Netflix had really like shoved down for a while and we were all just binging things in one day and like just having a lot of instant gratification.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I mean I thought this was brilliant that Disney brought back the singular release with The Mandalorian because it's like, well, you're all sitting at home and we need to make money on content. So we're going to give you
Right.
one episode at a time. And it brought back that excitement. It brought back that like sense of conversation and like, oh, what's gonna happen next week? And oh, I'm so excited for Tuesday because like the
Right.
show's gonna come out. And it just brought back that almost that sense of community. Like you could go to
Yeah.
the office on Monday and be like, oh, did you watch the new episode of that show? Wasn't it so good? I don't know. I think that was a little bit of like that was a little bit of Disney magic, for
Yeah. I
lack of a
mean,
better pun.
it's interesting too because I mean, Disney owns this content and they're gonna put more stuff out, and it's in the Disney universe, right? Disney Plus.
Yeah,
So they do not have to rely on movie theaters to for anything. I mean, but for their future releases, again, because they're making so much content, it doesn't make it as magical. If they announce, aha, we didn't let you guys know, it's a secret, there's going to be a Star Wars film on releasing on Thanksgiving weekend, people will still see it, but it won't be as magical.
it won't be what it was.
No.
But
It, is that sign of the times or?
I think it's a sign of the times, and it's kind of like you know how like I was talking about this with my boyfriend today. You know how an artist can release like a first album, like a debut album, and it just hits the nail on the head, and like they're
Right.
winning Grammy awards, and like they're
Right.
all over the world, and they're the biggest thing. And now they have the pressure of their sophomore album.
Mm.
And it's just like the expectation to deliver has gone from here to here, and like you are going to be so heavily judged in that thing, and either you're going to knock it out of the park again or it's going to be forever compared to your previous work and it'll never be as good.
Right.
And so it's almost like content is forever competing with itself.
Mm.
It's like your biggest competition is your former self, like George Lucas in Star Wars, which who I think Disney is realizing, like, they have the formula down, and, like, let's just let them make stuff. Like, let's just let Filoni and Favreau make stuff, get the thumbs up from George Lucas. Like, we don't need to be that. We were involved in the sequel movies, and clearly that went wrong. Like, so let's just let them make the content.
Is a thorn in every fan's side. Like,
yeah, and I know some people that love the sequel movies, and I do want to try to give them another chance, especially because they're making more Rey content. They announced that at Celebration this year, and so maybe I'll give them another chance. Like,
why? Who is Rey? First of all, why? Who is she? She's Force sensitive. Is she a Jedi? What is the why?
Well, she's supposed to be the last Jedi, which isn't true, I think.
Right. Again, it's like, make a commitment, and then if she's the last Jedi, who would? Well, that's the whole thing, the midichlorians thing, and Luke was supposed to be. I mean, that's where it gets kind of crazy. But no, the end of the movie, they had kids. They had a kid that was able to move the broom, like, and beat. Right. So he's the last Jedi.
I think that's what a lot of the current content is trying to do, because they came out with the sequel movies and there was all this confusion about what's going on, and like all this like confusing stuff with Palpatine and clones and like all this stuff. And I think that's what a lot of the shows are trying to do now, is to basically fix that. Like, Filoni's just playing retcon, trying to fix everything so that they can continue the story to make sense. So like the whole Palpatine cloning thing, that's a huge part of Bad Batch, which is another one of the animated series that came out, which is very good, very, very good. That came out, was it last year, maybe the year before? And they're 2 seasons of it are out, and they're very good. And they tie in heavily with basically like Palpatine's like long-term cloning attempts, and that ties into even things before the original trilogy, because there's a lot of like Darth Plagueis references that go back to the book about like Palpatine's origin story and like his Sith master and like how he became who he is.
Only because we are going to run out of time soon, but I got to ask you this. Do you believe the theory that Palpatine is still alive because he cloned himself?
I mean, it's possible, because he's been at it a long time. Like Plagueis was trying to live forever, and Palpatine realized that wasn't possible and is on the clone wave. And he's been on the clone wave a long time. So it's possible. I wouldn't mind another central villain, but I mean, it is kind of the overarching Star Wars concept that like the dark side is always at play. And there's only one Sith Lord at a time. So until another Sith Lord comes in to take Palpatine's place.
Right.
Because he never got another apprentice after Vader. I think he tried to make Rey, like I guess he had
no, he had Ren.
What's his
Ren.
Yeah, he had Ren. And then he tried to have Rey. Right. Ren and Rey. Don't know why they did that.
Bad, right.
So yeah, I guess like there's a lot. There's a lot of potential. I would love to pose that to somebody more well versed in the sequel movies. I will say, like, I am not well versed enough to speak confidently on that.
Cool. But in your heart's desire, do you want to be a clone still alive? Or the clone died and he's still alive?
Only if the writing makes sense. I'll take anything if the writing makes sense.
And I'll leave it right there because we're running out a couple of seconds. You're watching GeekCaster. Thank you very much. And go to geekcaster.com.